Alright, Pouring Nation, after my last video, I got a lot of questions about why these craft white paints are different than regular white paint. So I'm going to do a test of all of these white paints that I have, and these ones are just off-white. I wanted to see how they looked. But we have the soft body acrylic paint from Loft. This is the newer stuff, and you can kind of see that that is quite liquid, but it's not quite as liquid as this. And I want the test to be as similar as possible, so I'm going to add water to these three. You got the Liquitex Basics, which is by far the thickest of any of these paints. And then Amsterdam, which is kind of in between. It's got a little bit of softness to it, but it's not as liquid as these. So I'm going to add a little bit of water to make them the same liquid as these. I'm going to pour a 50-cent piece or a dollar coin of each one, and I'm just going to let them dry straight. And I want to show you what happens to dried white paint. All right, so we're just going to, I put the two matte paints together, the two satin paints, and then I had the gloss here, so. And I wanted the gloss to lay down flat, kind of like the other ones. I forgot that it's a little bit thicker, so that they're all drying at about the same texture and thickness. So now we'll just watch this over the next day or two, and then we'll bring you in for some close-ups. So this is right after me pouring. That's the Loft white, the soft body acrylic white. That's the Liquitex Basics, Amsterdam, Gloss Craft Smart, Satin Craft Smart, Satin Craft Smart in the vanilla, matte white Craft Smart, and the vanilla matte Craft Smart. All right, so it's been just over 24 hours since I put these down, and I want to show you some interesting results. The matte paint dried in probably 12 to 15 hours and immediately started cracking. It especially started on the outside, and just as it dried, it cracked a ton. The satin paint has a little bit of cracking, not a huge amount, but it does have a little bit of cracking, especially on the outside of where I poured it out. It didn't go all the way through, but it did give some indents there. This is also a satin, and all I got here were the bubbles that popped there, so it actually looks good. Same thing with the gloss Craft Smart paint. So that was those were all the Craft Smart paints. And then for the Amsterdam Liquitex Basics and the soft body acrylics, these are not fully dry yet. You can see I put my finger there. The skin on top is dry on this, but it's not dry underneath. But all I got here were bubbles that you saw popped when I first did it. So I don't expect any cracks to form there, but you can see why I tell people to avoid whites and any paint that has white in it. That's this matte dollar store Craft Smart paint, because this is essentially what happens. And I have a painting that was done a couple days ago that used these colors that have some of that white in it, and this is what happens. You get the cracking and crazing in the middle of your pour, and we definitely don't want that to happen. Although in this case it doesn't look bad with the composition of the piece and you don't notice it, but when you get down in close, you do see those cracks and crazes. So when it comes down to it, you can pay, $1.99 per ounce or $1.99, which is about $1 per ounce for this paint. This is about 79 cents or 99 cents, so 50 cents per ounce. But if you do the math, when you mix this with pouring medium, this is just as expensive as using a paint like this, because the ratios to pouring medium, which is generally cheaper, to paint is so much higher. So if you're going to use craft paints, don't use whites or colors that have a lot of white in them, or go up to the satin or gloss to make sure that you don't have the cracking and crazing happen. If you don't, I highly recommend for whites and light paints that have a lot of white in them that you get a more quality paint to save yourself time and trouble from having this cracking happening in the future. And if you are going to be painting with craft paint, I did a video here that shows the difference between a painting all done with matte paints, with gloss paints, and with satin paints. And I think you will want to see that to minimize any problems you have in the future with your paintings.